May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and redeemer. Amen. So last week, I scanned through my old sermons to see what I had said before about the Transfiguration. It comes sometimes once or twice a year. And even though all my sermons were basically different, they seemed to circle around a common theme. And that common theme is, after a mountaintop experience, you always have to come down from the mountain. I checked on the internet, and most of the sermons shared that same theme. The point of the story is this: while mountaintop experiences are wonderful, Jesus and the apostles had to come down from the mountain. And in the end, we Christians, regardless of the magical, mysterious, awesome experiences we might have with God, we still have to go back to the valley. We still have to go back to the messiness of life. So I began to think more about this story of Transfiguration. And I finally decided that I needed to be truthful to myself. The bottom line is that I desperately want the mountaintop experience as lived by Peter, by James, and by John. And as a young boy, even in elementary school, religion didn't seem to matter much if I couldn't experience God one-to-one. If I couldn't see God the way I see all of you here today. If I couldn't experience somehow the awesomeness, the majesty, the very being of God's presence in my life at any given moment. For me, it's the mountaintop experience, or at least the possibility of it, that makes living down here in the valley manageable. So the question becomes for us, why don't we have those mountaintop experiences that this story of Luke portrays in our gospel? Why don't we see Jesus for who he is? Why don't we hear Jesus when he calls to us? So I read the story over and over and over again, and I kept on being drawn to one line that somehow got to me. This is my son. Listen to him. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we don't have the mountaintop experience. Maybe we don't hear God's calling to us because we're not listening. Maybe we don't see transfiguration because we're not looking for it. I want to share with you a story I found on the internet. I'm not sure that it's a true story, but the Snopes website said it was unprovable. But it's entertaining. Anyway, this is the version I heard. FDR often had to endure long receiving lines at the White House when there was a special event or dinner. And he often complained that no one actually paid any attention to what he had to say. One day, during a reception, he decided to experiment. To each person who came down the line, he shook his hand and murmured, "I murdered my grandmother this morning." The guests responded with comments like this: "Marvelous, keep up the good work," or "God bless you for all you do, sir." Anyway, the story goes that finally the Bolivian ambassador was next in line. FDR took his hand and said, "I murdered my grandmother this morning." Not quite knowing what to say, the ambassador leaned over and whispered, "I'm sure she had it coming." We don't listen very well. But our ears are not always what's at fault. We usually hear the sounds other people make, yet we often feel that no one listens to us, or others might feel that we don't listen to them. Good listeners, say those who study listening, respect others and value their opinions. They try to stay inquisitive about each other, remembering that we can usually learn from others even if we don't agree with what they're saying. Good listeners take it slow and easy. They don't jump to conclusions or race ahead in the conversation. Good listeners stay in the moment. And I think that's the trick of both listening and seeing. Staying in the moment. Being attentive to who and what is around us. In his book, Table Talk, Martin Luther provides us with an example of staying in the moment, an example in which he emphasized the need and habit of concentration in his spiritual life and in his everyday life. This is what he said. When Luther's puppy happened to be at the table, he would look for a morsel from his master, and he intensely watched with open mouth and motionless eyes. Martin Luther said, "Oh, if I could only pray the way this dog watches the meat. All his thoughts are concentrated on the piece of meat. Otherwise, he has no thought, no wish, or no hope." I don't know, but I find it difficult sometimes to pay attention, to concentrate deeply. I'm too often focused on the tasks of the next moment to be in the here and now. I'm going to take another quote. Thomas Merton. He's one of my heroes. He was a Trappist monk in the hills of Kentucky. He wrote these words one morning. Okay. When he awoke in the middle of the night to go to chapel to say the divine office. This is what he said. "Here is an unspeakable secret. Paradise is all around us, and we do not understand. It is wide open, and we do not see. The sword is taken away, but we do not know it. We are off, one to his farm and another to his merchandise. Lights on, clocks ticking, thermostats working, stoves cooking, electric shavers filling radios with static. Wisdom, cries the dawn deacon, but we don't hear." And so I believe that the story of the Transfiguration this morning is just as much about us as it is about Jesus. As Merton says, paradise is all around us. We just sometimes miss it. My wife gave me a gift years and years ago, and it has a psalm that I like on it, a part of a psalm that I like. It's Psalm 46, and it says, "Be still and know that I am God." For most of us here today, our lives are filled with talking, our lives are filled often with doing. We're so busy talking and doing that we often miss the God who is constantly being transfigured in our presence. And so sometimes, the point of this whole sermon is one line. Sometimes we merely need to be still in order to meet the God who stands before us every day. Let the people say amen. Amen. Okay.